From very early on in life, we learn that there are things that are impossible in life. It's impossible to make something disappear in thin air. It's impossible to tell what's going to happen tomorrow or next week. We cannot predict the future. Objects are impenetrable. It's impossible that my hand go through an object. We learn all these things. These are physical laws, but I want to challenge them today a little bit. So if everything is right, you should have in your chairs an envelope, and inside that envelope there are 2 rubber bands. Please, if you were very disciplined persons, you didn't play with them, so you didn't lose them. Please take them out now to do an experiment with me. I'll take off, because magicians tend to put things in their sleeves. So take one of the rubber bands in one of your hands and put it in the index and thumb finger like this. I hope everyone can see. Just make a little loop. It's called this. Take the other rubber band, hold it with the index finger, and make it go inside that loop. So they are now interlaced. You cannot take them out, correct? Can you try? Yes? I said objects are impenetrable. I don't know if everyone can see, but the rubber bands can stretch a bit, so if you play a little bit with them, you can. Can you do it? Okay. So I just proved that one of the things that we learned is not really impossible. It's not impossible. Objects are not really impenetrable. I'll get back to this at the end of the talk, so don't worry. So if this is true, other things might be true as well. So perhaps it's possible to predict the future. So I have this slide now as a question. Please, if you really believe that I, Mariano Mendez, can predict the future correctly and consistently, meaning every time I predict something, I'm right. If you think that, please raise your hand now. Wow. I made a prediction this morning. Nobody will raise their hand. Right. You think I'm lying, right? I made another prediction. I forgot to count the guy at the back. Yeah, he was raising the hand. So it is possible to predict the future, as I have just showed you, and I will teach you, I will tell you how you can do that. But before I do that, I have to do a disclaimer, a legal disclaimer, because this explanation is only meant for educational purposes. It's like when you go to these places where they teach you how to hack a computer, they say this just to be safe. I cannot be held responsible if you follow my instructions, but not exactly, and you make mistakes. So you may be sued by someone. I cannot be held responsible if you follow my instructions exactly either. So one way or the other. And, oh no, this is for another presentation. Sorry, it was a mistake. Sorry, okay. So let me tell you the story of how I learned to predict the future. A few years ago, when I lived in Argentina, I once was at home and I received a letter, postal letter on paper from a guy. Yes, at that time there was no internet, so there were no emails. I'm that old. This guy wrote a letter to me and said, look, I know it will be difficult for you to believe, but I can predict the future. And I know that you're going to be skeptical because you're a scientist. But please, hold on a moment with me, and I will show you that I can predict the future. And he said, the first thing I want to say is that tonight there is a football game. Like here, like the Europa League, Ajax is playing Manchester United. There was a football game in South America that night, and he said, Team A is going to win. Actually, Team A wasn't the strongest, so I thought, this guy is just making it up. Anyway, I went on with my life. The following day, I picked up the newspaper. Yes, Team A won. Wow, coincidence, who knows? The week after, I received another letter from the guy who says, look, I predicted Team A was going to win, and it won. Now I'll show you I can predict. You can think it's a coincidence. I'll show you that it's not. I'll show you another one. And he made another prediction. There was a basketball final, like the NBA final, and he said, Team B is going to win. Again, I was not so impressed, but okay. The following day, I read the newspaper, Team B won. Wow. The week after, he sent me another letter and said, you know, this company, the shares of this company are going to go up tomorrow in the market. Again, didn't believe it. The next day I read the newspaper, they went up. And so he went on for 9 weeks in a row predicting exactly what was going to happen. At some point, I was convinced. If you're not convinced, you're very skeptical. So week number 10, I get another letter and it says, now tonight there is a boxing match. Boxer A is playing boxer B. You can bet, because I tell you who's going to win. Now, if you're convinced, you can go and bet and win some money. And he said, I do this. You might wonder why I don't do it myself. Why don't I go and bet myself and make myself millionaire? And he said, the reason is that it happens, I don't know why, I can tell the future, but whenever I try to use it to profit myself, it doesn't work. So I need to make someone else profit. Voluntarily, this person doesn't have to do it, it's just their own decision. That makes it work. And the next thing is, I ask them a little payback. If they make it, if they bet, and if they win, because I give them the prediction, I ask them, okay, pay me something back. And I thought, well, it's fair. If he tells me how to make money, it's fair. So I went, collected my savings. There was not enough money. My parents had money under the mattress for a second honeymoon. I didn't tell them anything, took the money, went with all this money to the betting shop, stood on the row, get to the counter, and said, I want to bet for boxer A, because that was the guy he told me was going to win. Next to me, there was another person also betting for that boxing match, and he was betting for boxer B. And I thought, he doesn't know. Poor guy is going to lose his money because I'm going to win because the guy told me. Anyway, so I bet. He looked at me also a bit strange, but okay, he left before me, and when he was leaving, he let something fall from his pocket, a piece of paper. So I thought, okay, I'll pick it up and give it to him. When I picked it up and looked at it, it looked familiar to me. Started reading. It was the same text of all the letters that I had been receiving the last 9 weeks. Except now, in my case, it said boxer A was going to win. In his case, it said boxer B was going to win. So you start to imagine how I felt. I put the money of my parents, all my money, so I was going to become poor, and also my parents will never like me anymore. And I realized immediately, or after a while, I realized what was going to happen. Let me explain you. What the guy did is he collected a list of 1,024 persons. And he divided them in 2 groups of 512 each. So he then sent letters to each person in each group, and half of them got the prediction A, the other half got the prediction B. That was the first prediction he made. He waited to see what was the result of that event, and he said, okay, if A was the result, then B did not happen, so all these persons are now discarded. I keep the other 512. So I divide them now in 2 groups again, 256 each, and I sent half of them prediction A, half of them prediction B. Wait for the result, see what happens. If B is what happens, I lose those 256. I'm left with 256. I divide them in 2 groups of 128, and I continue doing that 9 times until I'm left with only 2 persons. And if you do that, you send prediction A to one and prediction B to the other, and one of them will win, and one of them will give you the money, will send you money. If they bet, they will send this guy money. So the way it works is like this. I have this little animation. You start with 1,024. This number is just a power of 2. That means that you can always keep dividing it by 2, by 2, by 2. And so what you do is you divide them in these 2 groups. You check, oh, B is not happened, then I take A. So B is not happened, I go A, and you follow the lines that are not crossed. Whenever there is a cross, that part of the people you just forget. You keep going with the others until you're left only with 2. And that's when you give them the final prediction, and one of them, no matter which one, will win. So you can imagine that was not nice, because I had to hope now that I would win. I don't tell you what happened in the end. I tell you I had to use this trick for many, many years to pay my parents back. No, really, this is not something that happened to me. This is a story that is told in a movie by Hitchcock. It's called The Mail or the Prophet from 1957 with these two actors. And actually, it's exactly what happens. The story is exact, but it's only that he bets the money from his company instead of his parents. But it's a very nice story. And the reason I say that is because it uses something that is called a cognitive illusion. It's called the survivor's bias. If I tell you I have a company that sells parachutes, the parachutes must be fantastic because I never heard a complaint from any user. Right? So if I look at the users that survived, they will not complain. The ones that died will not complain either. There was this guy during the Second World War, Abraham Wall, who realized this was a problem. They were sending planes to bombard the Nazis, and when the planes came back, they looked at where they were hit. They make an inventory of the places where the planes were hit, and they said, okay, we have to reinforce those places because otherwise they fall. They couldn't reinforce the whole plane because it was becoming too heavy, so they have to choose the places. But this guy said, no, you don't have to reinforce those places. You have to reinforce the places where you don't see hits. Because the planes that came with those hits actually came. Likely, the ones that did not come back were hit in those places where these ones were not hit. Right? So you should reinforce the places where the planes that come back are not hit, because the other planes fell. And that worked. This is the survivor's bias. It happens in many other things. I wrote something here like 95% of the world population is happy or extremely happy, shows a study of the Facebook profiles of a large number of persons. When you go to a Facebook profile of someone, they had fantastic holidays, they went to fantastic restaurants, they had fantastic wine. They never had this awful restaurant where the food was very bad, and they went to a holiday where it rained the whole time, you know. Another one, almost everybody is a paranoid, concluded a psychiatrist on the basis of a sample of his patients. Yes. So this is called the survivor's bias, and it was actually introduced way longer, 2,500 years ago, by a philosopher called Diogenes. I will not go to the story. You can look it up on the internet if you want. I don't have too much time to talk about that. One of the things that happens to that is also something that we all had experience with. It's called premonition. We had a dream that something bad was going to happen or something good was going to happen, and it happened. The following day, it happened. And the feeling that you get, wow, I dreamt it, it happened. Or you're at home and moving papers, and suddenly a picture of a friend that you haven't seen for 20 years, well, maybe you are so young that maybe for 5 years, 10 years, let's say, you haven't seen them, and then the next day you see that person at the supermarket. Wow, how does that happen? Well, the way it happens is we dream every night about someone or something. We see pictures of people many times, but we don't see them the next day at the supermarket. And so we forget. We don't remember that we had that dream. We only remember when it happens the next day. So we only remember the survivors. We forget the ones who died. The feeling is fantastic. I had it too. But you can explain it scientifically. In science, we have those problems. We need to know how ignorant we are about our ignorance. We need to do that. It's something called completeness. If you look at the sample of animals, of stars, or anything, you have to think, how are the stars that we don't see, that we missed? How do they contribute? How do they make me understand what I see now? The human mind cannot deal with non-events, things that don't happen. We cannot deal with those. Everyone remembers what happened on September 11, 2001, right? Almost everyone knows. No one knows what happened on July 7. No one knows what happened on October 6. No one knows what happens on June 14. Those dates say you nothing. Perhaps in one of those days there was a guy who prevented a similar attack as the one on September 11, but you don't know because it didn't happen. You know there was a guy who failed preventing the attack on September 11 because it happened. Your faculty, your institute, your country runs over day after day, day after day. If I go to my institute is there tomorrow. Well, tomorrow is a holiday, but the day after, it's still there, actually. But it's still there because someone, many people, took care that it didn't collapse, that the budget is there, that the positions are there, the computers are working. But if one day I go there and nothing works and the building is falling apart, I will remember, right? I don't notice the positive things that happen. It's something like in Alice in Wonderland, the birthday. There are 364 birthdays and one birthday. We don't know much about the birthdays. You know this guy, likely, Steve Jobs. This guy is remembered because he dropped out of school, university, he went to a garage, started a company, and make it $1 billion business. But you don't know that there are millions of others who did exactly the same but never made it. So if you look at the stairs, let me see how it goes. I forgot. Oh, I went the wrong direction, sorry. Is this one. Is still Steve Jobs is this last one over there. I forgot. No one gave me the pointer, but it doesn't matter. It's the one there. But you don't remember. So he's that one. We remember the one that survived, but we forget all the others. Human mind likes causality. So things are caused by things. So he became a millionaire because he dropped school. But there are many random things. All those other 1,023, if you add all these crossed numbers, they add up to 1,023. And if you count, there are actually 9 rows until you find the last one. It's 9 times you split the thing in 2. But we forget, and we tend to think there are casual things that produce this. But it's full of, this life is full of accidents. Randomness. This guy is a Nobel Prize in economy, but he's a psychologist. He said, our minds are strongly biased towards causal explanations and cannot deal well with mere randomness. Stories of businesses, empires, people, companies, whatever, that rise and fall, strike a chord in our mind because it gives us what we want. We find the reason why this happened, but this happened just by chance. And it happens many more times that people fall than that they rise. So the last 30 seconds are to explain how the rubber band trick works. So now you see, because you cannot predict the future, it's a trick, so you cannot make things go through. So can you please be the witness for the rest of the world here that the things are really are correct? Okay, so and my sleeves are, okay, actually I'll do something else this time. I only have one now. So things can disappear in thin air. Thank you very much.